First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Oops, I got, sorry. Gotta get my introduction. Hi. Front row. Front row.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm David Lamb, I'm the organizer of this presentation tonight, and you're here for, obviously, for Stephen Mrozek to speak about the Descending from the Clouds program. Let me give you a little bit of background information. I would like to ask, we are filming this as usual. If you wouldn't mind silencing your cell phones, that would be appreciated. Stephen has, over the last 40 years, his interest in military history has taken him on a life of adventure. He's retired after a 26-year career in the Army, which included service in Afghanistan and the Middle East. He spent 12 months in Afghanistan training the Afghan forces. He now leads guided tours over many of the hard-fought battlegrounds of the Second World War. As a national historian for the 82nd Airborne Division Association for over 20 years, he's had the opportunity to interview hundreds of veterans of various conflicts and preserve their stories. Many of these accounts have been included in several books he has written and contributed to. Traveling across Europe and the Mediterranean region, he has explored many of the battlefields and historic locations and learned about from veterans and other historians. He has former experience as the assistant curator of the Dawson Great Lakes Museum on Belle Isle, which parallels his interest in Great Lakes history and experience as a wreck diver exploring our history under the water. He has 2 books that he has written, in case you wanted to try and find them. Apparently they're available on Amazon.com. One is called the 82nd Airborne Division, and his other book is Prop Blast Chronicle of the 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Okay, with that, here's Stephen.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah. You best.
Okay.
Huh? No.
Hi, everybody. Pleasure for me to be here and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, jumping out of airplanes, good and otherwise. And first time I thought about jumping out of airplanes was back in the 80s. I like reading a lot, but a lot of times I like to experience things for myself. You can read a book about jumping out of an airplane, but then you have no idea what it's like. There's a emotional high and low that takes place in that. There's a lot of other things, and as a diver and also a parachutist, you get a chance to experience things and you learn about yourself personally, what you're capable of doing. A lot of times you can do stuff that most people seldom sell short. And I've known some extraordinary people. I've known in my military career and professional career 8 Medal of Honor recipients and just really remarkable people from World War II to Vietnam, and some great people. And a lot of that had to do with my encounters with airborne troops, airborne soldiers. So I began digging into a lot of this stuff and became interested in the whole idea of a parachute. Like, who in the heck came up with this idea, you know? And so it's been pretty interesting. And I hope you find it interesting yourself, too. And let's hope I do this all right. This is a quote over here that, I don't know if you ever read this before, but I've seen it in a couple of magazines. Where is the prince who can afford so to cover his country with troops for its defense, as that 10,000 men descending from the clouds may not, in many places, do an infinite deal of mischief before a force can be brought against to repel them? And this is the part here. They didn't have airplanes. And so this is something that Ben Franklin had written. And he was always a forward thinker. And I don't think he had anything like this in mind. But this introduces a new concept in warfare called vertical envelopment. This is a technical term for another dimension to the battlefield. You have troops that move on the battlefield in different directions, but now they're coming out of the sky. So let's look into what a parachute is. And it's actually a French term. The word para, to protect against, and the word shoot, to fall, so essentially protecting against falling. That sums it up there. You know, it's and that was this is once again 1784. This they didn't have aircraft then, and the whole idea of a parachute was something that was rather it was a concept. You know, they never really they envisioned something that may work, but they never really put it to practice. This is by far is the earliest form of a type of parachute, and none other than Leonardo da Vinci in 1485 came up with this concept. But this is a nice drawing in a sketchbook, but it probably would have worked, but no one tested it. So no one drew the short straw. You know, okay, now you jump this thing. But when you think about how a parachute works, this probably could have worked, but we'll never know. I'm not trying it, but and the first idea of a functional parachute is Italian in 1617, and it's called pretty much a flying man. Essentially, what you're doing here is you're creating a lot of drag. So as a object is coming down, it catches air. I don't think it's going to catch enough air. Once again, I wouldn't do this one, but they're working on, you know, they're working on the same concept. The whole idea of creating drag and catching the air and slowing down like an air brake. This is they're heading in the right direction. This is the first time André Jeannaire in 1797 he made several jumps out of a hot air balloon with descent, and well, a little bit different, but there's some certain aspects or parts, major components of a parachute, and he's got two of them there as far as the harness goes. That's yet to be determined. But he makes quite a few of these, and I think around 15 to 20 parachute descents out of a hot air balloon. And this was in France. Parachutes, as we know them now, are composed of essentially three parts. You have a canopy, and this is something that the canopy itself, the traditional type, is around. It's a round canopy, but they become developed even more parabolic, so they come down and just kind of swoop down, so it creates more drag. They can hold more air, and since the type of material they're made out of. What's the first thing you think of when you thinking about a canopy, about the material? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Silk. Okay, that's exactly what I wanted you to say. Good job. Here's the problem with silk. It's an organic material, and which means it can decompose. And the initial parachutes were made out of it because it was a light material. It was not exactly very porous, but if it got wet, that's where the deterioration process. I've worked on a veteran brought from Japan. He was an American veteran in occupation and brought back a Japanese parachute, which I thought was just amazing. And we had a lot of room, and we opened it up, and we slowly pulled it out. Silk, when it gets really old, it gets brittle and breaks. And so this was, there were some brittle parts to it. It would crack. You want to be careful not to crack it. The retaining bands, there was rubber bands to hold the suspension lines together and everything. Obviously, they didn't hold up. But it would not, underage, it would not work. It would come apart. The harness on it was altogether different. I'd have to pull it out and show it to you so you can compare and contrast. But initial parachutes were made out of silk because it was that type of material. It was light. It met all the requirements for packing a canopy in a small container and for deployments. But water will destroy it. Age will destroy it. It would work a couple of times, maybe 3, and then it would age, and every time you used it, it would be less reliable. So they came up with another material on it in World War II, and you ladies thank all your contributions, your nylon stockings. You didn't have them in World War II. They used that nylon for the manufacture of a canopy. It was not very porous. It was very strong, durable. This canopy was used in Operation Market Garden in September '44, and it's great. I found parachutes that were buried in 1944, and except for being faded, it's like all those leisure suits out there, you know, that trying to get rid of, you know, they're going to be around forever. The polyester stuff. So the synthetic materials will hold up. And if these have gotten wet, but you just dry them out and life's good. So, the suspension lines, these are what designs a canopy. It's usually for each riser you've got 6 suspension lines that come down. And it helps contain the canopy. This can vary approximately about 20, 24 feet of suspension lines. And in the military, we call it 550 cord. It's 5 strands and has 500 pound tensile strength. That's what 550 stands for. And it's very durable stuff. So it's very something. You need something strong. You get something very light. And then the harness. This has changed over the years, different materials. I have a World War II parachute over there. We'll take a look at that a little bit later on. But essentially, the deployment system changes too. This has a little pilot chute up there, which is a pilot chute deployed canopy. So you leave the aircraft or the platform, and it helps systematically deploy your main canopy out as it comes out in an orderly fashion so that it opens up. And we'll see more about that a little bit later on. But you have these are risers. The technical name are risers. There's 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and they can be used to control in World War II, they used to influence the direction of your canopy by grabbing your left set of risers, your front and left, and pulling them down to your chest. That's why we did all these push-ups. You can grab the canopy and pull it down. And what you're doing is you're tilting the canopy. In essence, it's like if you have and we've all done this, you blow up a balloon and let it go, and the Air forces it out and does all kinds of things. It creates, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So as the canopy tilts, spills out that air, it forces the jumper and the parachute and everything to move in the opposite direction. In most cases. It's not a reliable way of steering your parachute, but in a lot of ways that's the only thing you have. So the risers were very important. And then later on they came up with a way of, you had to be able to separate yourself sometimes real quick from the parachute. So we have these things called canopy release assemblies or cape wells. And you pull the cover down, and I'll demonstrate how you can remove yourself from this parachute in an emergency situation. So essentially this is what we're looking at over here. You have a round canopy with very long suspension lines, and then you have a substantial amount of weight here to hold the air inside the canopy, and it gives you your drag, and it slows down your rate of descent. something that's bearable. Parachute deployments. This is a free fall chute, a free fall rig with a pilot chute. So you're not connected to the aircraft in any way, shape, or form. By falling and at the right time, you take your ripcord, you pull it, and you, or in many cases, you just take your pilot chute out and let it go. Catches the air and it deploys the parachute. The pilot chute just pulls everything out, as you can see here. Once the canopy is fully extended, you have an air channel here. And it's all part of the packing process is to create a good, clear air channel. And the air comes up to the top and then it deploys it outward. And then we've got this and life's good. In packing a parachute, we're not going to get into that too heavy, but you have this air channel in it that has to be rather clear of any obstructions or any possibility. A lot of times you have a partial malfunction where the parachute comes out, but it doesn't do this. It's sending at a high rate of speed, and there's this kind of flapping in the breeze called a streamer. And usually what happens is that the material comes up and it covers that air channel. But as he said, as our instructors would say, you have the rest of your life to get that undone. It's actually about 8 seconds descending from 1,000 feet. In that case, you just don't worry about it. You jump to your reserve and activate that. Any questions or anything? Yes, sir.
So it's 2.5 to 3 seconds from step 1 to step 8.
Well, once you got this, you have. I'm not trying to make sure I understand your question.
How long does it take to, okay, so you said at the bottom 2.5 to 3 seconds. From which stage to which stage is that?
From number 2 to number 8. When you leave the aircraft, military, you get into a tight body position. We're not. This is called a stable arc position. So, you know what a shuttlecock is? Badminton birdie.
Yes.
No matter what you do, you throw it up, it always lands the same way. It's because of the center of gravity is right here. So if you leave the aircraft and you go into a stable arc position where you equalize the amount of resistance on the air as you're coming down, with your legs in here, you're in a free fall. And then at a certain altitude, usually before, if you're in a free fall, usually it's above 2,000 feet, and it's manually operated. So you have to compensate for the air resistance by bringing these hands in together, grabbing the ripcord grip, and extending out. And then at that point, when you jump from an aircraft with a static line, you have 4 seconds. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000. You get to 4 1,000, you should have a canopy over your head already. And it's really quick. If you go into 5 1,000, 6 1,000, at that point, you're a tight body position. If you're counting to 6 and you get into 7, what's called the reserve parachute in front of you. Don't worry about that. Just you take your ripcord grip, pull it, get rid of it, and make sure you get your canopy out there. I'll talk more about that later. Sir?
Expressed as a percentage, what is the reliability of that sequence happen properly?
Is this happening?
Oh, the overall as a percentage.
I was talking to a gentleman over here. I jumped out of an aircraft 119 times. I never had to use my reserve. As a matter of fact,
That's for you personally, but how about generally?
Generally, it's
Close to
very reliable.
100%?
Yeah, there's an old saying, a bumper sticker. I won't repeat it here, but yeah, I will. It says, remember when sex was safe and parachuting was dangerous. It's just flip-flop, the complete opposite. that's how far I'm gonna go on that one. But the canopy is a, parachute is very reliable. Where we're at right now with our equipment. As long as you do things, exit the aircraft, good body position, do what they teach you to do, no problem. The lowest I've ever jumped was, they figured out about 470 feet. Now that was, that day I was supposed to jump at 1,000. But the pilot, the altimeter, instead of being at AGL, ground level, was at sea level, and it was the highest part in Holland. And we went out the door, and I handed off my static line, went out the door, and said, this is not 1,000 feet. I'm already out of the aircraft, so I just can't turn around and go back. I just go with it, and canopy opened up, and about 3 seconds later, I'm on the ground. So, and we all had, and no one had any problems. But that reserve parachute we had, we just to make it comfortable, a security blanket. But parachuting is, the equipment is very reliable now. I would not hesitate. Most of the time there's any issues, it's because of jumper error, human error. Another type of parachute, it's gone through like an incredible metamorphosis. There are a lot of different designs and everything. Now the military parachutes are not round, they're square, the T11s. This is a free fall rig over here. This is a 7-cell canopy. It's like a flying wing. So in front of your parachute, in front of the canopy in front are these open cells. Usually a 7-cell, sometimes you have 9 cells. And the air coming into it, the way it deploys, it comes out and then it instantly fills up with air and it creates a wing. So you're flying. You have forward momentum, forward speed, and you have these toggles in front. And if you grab they're inside of your front set of risers, and they're a little different on civilian rigs. And you pull it down. You pull it down. What it does, your canopy opens up. And you pull down your left toggle. You're taking the left corner and pulling it down. And so what that does is it creates more drag here than over here. So it forces the canopy to go in this direction. And you let up on it. I can be going this way, and I can turn 90 degrees and go this way. And there's a whole philosophy around it. When you land, you want to land into the wind. Otherwise, the round canopies I've jumped with, they have a forward speed of 12, 13 miles an hour. So if you're landing with the wind, and the wind is 15 miles an hour, now we'll just say 12 miles an hour, and you're going with the wind, that means you're going this direction 24 miles an hour. And that'd be interesting. I want to watch that one, But usually it's like a feet, knees, face sort of thing. And what you're supposed to do is you turn into the wind, and that should be 0. So you're coming straight down, theoretically. Ma'am?
What is the process when you hit the ground? Are you rolling over?
Yeah, there's something called a parachute landing fall. It's a way of this here, you don't do that. What you do, since I have the slide up here, you come in with a ram air chute, and you're coming into the wind, and you stall the wing. By turning the wing up like this, you stall it, and it just fails, so it comes down. So it's all timing. It's all timing. You can come in maybe about this high off the ground, and then you pull both risers down. It stalls it, and it lifts you up, and it sets you gently down on your feet.
On your feet?
Yeah, if you do it right, it takes practice. But this is easier on the body. Military stuff, we don't use on mass tactical parachute jumps, where you have an aircraft, you're dumping on just a lot of people on a piece of real estate. You're carrying a lot of extra equipment with you. You have a lot of people doing different things in the air, so you don't have a steerable ship. There'll be a lot of collisions in the air. So you just come down and everyone just kind of does what they, 200 feet above the ground, you go up. 100 feet above ground, you drop your equipment, you can lower your equipment so that lands before you do. And it allows you to be able to do what's called a PLF, a parachute landing fall. And that's not my favorite part of the training. You just, there's a sawdust pit and you just do it, you just beat yourself up, and you jump school, they just, it's not fun. But it's necessary to get you, there's a certain way of doing it, coming in, and you turn slightly and you land and you roll. And it's just like jumping off the top of the cave. So they say, but I've landed like a sack of potatoes more than once. That makes life interesting. A military application, sir.
So you drop your equipment at 100 feet?
Roughly 100 feet.
Is this free fall?
No, not, you've got a canopy, a round canopy over your head.
Yeah.
And you, it's hard to do a PLF, a parachute landing fall, with 100 pounds of equipment in front of you. And your weapon. So you have a, we used to have a H harness, you used to lower it if you had a single point release. So you just pull this and it lowers it down on a 15-foot lowering line. So it's going to hit the ground before you do. And you take your weapon goes down there too, and it's still connected to you. But it's going to hit the ground first, so it allows you to be able to do that. Well, then, sir.
Were you trained for accidental landing in water?
Oh, you do all,
Oh, you do?
Murphy's Law, anything can go wrong, it will. So, hazards on the drop zone, you know, like electric power lines, you know, that's something we train for. Landing in trees, I have one tree landing. Nothing really difficult. Water landings, I made intentional water landings. And what else is there?
Windmill.
That's, what's that?
Windmill.
Windmill.
Army in the Second World War.
Yeah, well, that's it pretty much. You have hazards on the drop zone where you have, you're coming in and all you see is water below you. I can go into it, but, yeah. Sir?
So let's take like the Normandy landing or like the Normandy parachute falls. Like, what would they do? Would they drop their equipment, like their
No,
rifles and
well,
stuff?
matter of fact, I'm going to ask you to volunteer. I'll show you what a Normandy parachute will look like. Thanks for volunteering. They tell you, first they tell you in the Army, don't raise your hand. Okay, no, it won't hurt. Much. Recovery rate is pretty good. Military application of parachute, the Russians came up with this first thing. Actually, prior to that, how many have heard of Billy Mitchell? Yeah, good. Billy Mitchell was quite an innovative thinker. He was a forward thinker. And always thinking outside the box, and I guess that's what got him in trouble. But when you're in a more conventional, conservative environment and you come up with some ideas, sometimes it doesn't work too good. But he's the one who perfected aerial bombardment, use of aircraft for bombing things. And because of World War I, we had a stalemate there. We had these trenches, and we wasted a lot of resources and lives trying to gain about 50 feet. So he came up with this bright idea and of dropping soldiers from parachutes. And the thing is, we didn't have any parachute-trained soldiers or aircraft to carry them to do this. So he already had this idea. The 1st Infantry Division was going to be the 1st Airborne Division and descend. And they were actually, he was working real hard to move in that direction, and one thing got in his way, and that's the armistice. So the war ended, thank God, for the guys in the 1st Division. And the type of equipment, they didn't have troop parachutes that would have facilitated this. They didn't, you know, how are you going to carry your equipment? How do you land? And it's being able to concentrate on the drop zone a large number of soldiers to be able to accomplish the mission rather than scatter them all over the place. And that's pros and cons you have to look at. But he's the first one, and that was in 1918, he came up with this idea. It never happened though. But this did. The Russians had a parachute and a reserve, and they would fly in the aircraft, climb all the way out over here, get on the wing, and when this guy up over here waved the flag, it was time for you to let go. Flying off the wing, and you pull everything. You had a reserve, a main, just pull it, you know. And now what happens when you're coming down and you have a main canopy opened up, usually like a 28-foot World War II, 28-foot diameter canopy, and a reserve canopy, which is like a 24-foot. They're like this, so the air is spilling out this way, and you have no control over that descent. You know you're going in one direction. You're going down there, it's like you have no control over your destiny. But this was a first application of the use of military application of taking soldiers and dumping them out over on the battlefield. And a couple of people were watching this training thing. Hermann Goering, he was watching it, and also the British were interested in it, but the Germans were the first to act on it. And, sure.
In what action or conflict was that point?
This happened in 1930, so this never, the Russians actually...
This is a training exercise?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was training exercise, yeah. But they actually, in World War II, the Russians did make combat drones, a couple of them, 2 of them, and then small unit actions. So they...
Was the plane going very slow then, that you didn't track the plane?
Not necessarily. You know, they like to slow down to like 120 miles an hour. I've jumped out of C-47s, and they've jumped down to 100. And there's an aircraft the Air Force used to have called the C-141, and when it hit 120 miles an hour, it started to come out of the sky, so they have to accelerate. So we're doing this. It's like, get me out of this thing. You know, it's going up and down, because what this says is he's trying to slow down for jump speed, stay on the jump itself, and then that means the plane's falling out of the sky, then you have to accelerate to get back up there, get to jump altitude, or something close to it. The in Panama in 1989, where we invaded the 3 Ranger battalions and 3 battalions of the 82nd Airborne. You put 6 battalions of infantry, roughly 800 men per battalion. We inundated the whole country, and that was, you know, there's I have this print that when diplomacy fails, and it's the Ranger dropped on Rio Hato airfield, and just cover the area, just inundate it, secure the airfield so that other follow-on aircraft can come in.
Can't imagine being a Panama person watching